something like that, where there's constant cash coming in
Mhm.
that needs to be put to work, it is the perfect place for a capital allocator to be in.
That time period was very, very volatile for him. And I think he learned a lot of lessons about how he didn't want to manage a business. And I think that helps set up more of the decentralized nature of what it is that they do. All right, folks, welcome to Investing for Beginners podcast. Today, we're going to talk about Warren Buffett. We're going to do an investor deep dive into one of our favorite investors. So we'll do a little spotlight on Warren Buffett. So the Buff Dog has had a huge impact on both of our investing styles as well as our education. And we thought we would share some of our lessons from him and maybe what we've learned from him along the way. So I guess let's start with talking a little bit about Buffett and maybe a little bit of his early years and how some of that has formed how he started and maybe what he's doing today. So what are your thoughts on any of that?
According to myth and legend, he started at the age of 10
Yeah.
or 11 and bought his first stocks. So, yeah, we're all way behind
Yeah, late
him.
bloomer, right?
I think the thing I found most impressive, there's lots of things, and there's some good stories too about how he found this stock or that stock. Apparently, he had read every business and investing book in his local library. And I think he did that before high school or something
Mhm.
ridiculous. So he definitely put the work in to try to learn as much as he can. Not to mention the fact that he's always been very good at math as well. So that probably didn't hurt much either. Those kinds of things, when you hear about that, and then you imagine if he did that in childhood, what kind of work did he put in as an adult, as a professional? It starts to make sense why he's so good at what he does.
Mhm. Yeah, completely. Yeah. When you see the pattern that was set early on and you see how that pattern continued to be used the rest of his life, he really started early and set himself up for success as he went along. And obviously, he was naturally gifted. He was, like you said, very smart, good at math, and could retain a lot of knowledge. And I think that helped set him apart. Plus, he was driven. He knew what he wanted from a young age, and he was willing to pursue it. And I know for myself that was not something that was something I struggled with when I was younger. And so I admire that about him, that he understood what he wanted and he was willing to do what it took to pursue that. And I think that's very admirable.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else stand out about his early days?
I think I read that he's not only was he investing in the stock market, but I think he was also like entrepreneurial in spirit. Like he had a not mail route, a newspaper route. So he delivered newspapers as a kid. He also, I believe, bought a gumball machine or two and was making money with those. He used to buy 6 packs of Coke and sell them at school. He'd buy them for like 2 or 3 cents each and then sell them for like 5 cents at school. So he's always kind of had that entrepreneurial bent to him. And I think that to me was kind of interesting, something I learned not too long ago.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. So take us along his journey then. So he started, has a lot of early exposure with investing in business. And then what were the next steps for his life?
Well, he discovered The Intelligent Investor. It was written by Ben Graham, and he read it and fell in love with it and really took all those lessons to heart that Ben Graham was talking about. And around the same time, he actually went to Columbia to study with Ben Graham. I believe he actually applied to Harvard but was rejected and then went to Columbia instead and studied with Ben Graham. And that really set him up for what he was going to do for the rest of his life.
Yeah, Ben Graham, we could do a profile on him too.
Right.
He really paved the way when it came to
Mhm.
buying stocks that were cheap, buying stocks that Wall Street didn't like, and buying companies that maybe had a bunch of warts. And the reason why they were cheap is because they didn't have necessarily all the best characteristics.
Mhm.
But he was one of the people who discovered that you can still make a lot of money in the stock market buying things that are subpar if you are willing to buy something that other people don't want to, and waiting for the market to recognize a company's true value.
Mhm.
And so very, very, very influential in Buffett's early days and how he picked stocks, how he chose to make money as an investor in his early days.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it really had a huge impact, and a lot of the things that he learned, even though Charlie Munger had an impact on his impacting style as he got older, a lot of the things that he learned from Ben Graham he still follows today, and it really it had such a huge impact on him, and as he said in the past, value investing really you either get it or you don't, and I think he definitely got it right off the bat, and it really kind of fit his personality. You also got to remember this was in the late 40s early 50s, so coming out of World War II, the Great Depression, so times were very disjointed, and there was lots of ups and downs, and not only in the market but just in the world in general. And so I think something like value investing probably really appealed to him is a way of trying to find balance in when you're trying to invest in those kinds of things. So I think that had a huge impact on him.
It makes me wonder how much as investors as we are today, we have such a long-term mindset.
Mhm.
It seems to be very commonly practiced and talked about. But we live in a time of such prosperity and peace relative to history,
Right.
even in the United States. So you wonder how much of that peace and prosperity allows us the comfort to have a long-term mindset.
Hmm.
And if that wasn't the case in the culture in, like you're saying, the 40s and 50s, that's maybe why investors didn't behave the same way that you might see them do now.
Right. Yeah. Very much so. Very much so. And I think to that point, you think about how much convenience we have. It's kind of a dichotomy. And today, everything is fast. Everything's got to be done fast. Our food is fast. We watch our news in 5-minute clips. We read very short, brief things, YouTube shorts, Instagram shorts. Everything is quick. But the flip side of that is investing for us is long and long-term patience. When I think of Warren Buffett, I think of a very patient person sitting on a porch reading a very thick book and not getting excited about all the things going on around him. That's my mental image of somebody like him. And when I think of today as investors, we all talk about long-term investing, and that's our practice and being patient. But I also feel like there's this pull that they didn't have 50 years ago, this pull to do everything quickly.
Mm. Yeah, it's a good point. If you look at some of the things you mentioned, like the gumball machine
Mm-hmm.
or the way he kind of leveled up his income, it did have that. He was displaying this compounding mindset,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very long term mindset. You
Yeah.
don't generally think of it in that way unless you're trying to compound. So I don't know. I find that kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally do too. So, what do you think about like his early years as an investor? Like after he left Columbia, kind of where did he kind of land, and then what did he do?
Yeah, he started his own investment partnership, and originally it was just to manage some family and friends' money along with his own. He's always had skin in the game from the very beginning. He's always been invested with the people he's managing money for, and that's just something I think he just understood that that's the right thing to do. And he's always had this kind of sense through the decades of doing the right thing to do because that's the right thing to do. And, you're not going to convince him otherwise, kind of a thing. I remember in reading a couple letters, his first letters to his partnership didn't really outline some of the specifics of his strategies, but as the years went on, he started to classify different types of stocks as different types of things. He didn't use the word sidecar investing, but he had a portion of his portfolio which was kind of sidecar investing. In other words, finding a good company with good management and just letting that ride. He also had other, I'm blanking on what he called them, but kind of like big stalwart, big company that was unloved. So we have these different categorizations of how he invested. And I find that kind of fascinating and relatable that he thought about stocks in many of the same ways we do, of kind of bucketing them into these
Mhm.
different categories, because that can simplify things. If you can simplify the very complex market and start to apply some structure to it,
Mhm.
it does help in making you feel like you are getting a good grip on things. And he certainly did that in his early days also.
Yeah, he definitely did, and yeah, I love that too because it really helped. I think when you categorize or bucket things like that, it helps remove some of the anxiety of like all these moving parts, and I don't know where to start, and I don't know what to do. And if you just focus on okay, these three areas, I'm going to do these, and these, then it helps. Not only does it help, like narrow things down, but it also limits your choices to a certain extent, and that can also help with some of the analysis paralysis. There's so many things to choose from. I don't know what to do. There's 7,000 stocks I could choose from. I don't know. Do I start here or here? So I love that idea. And the other thing that stood out for me from reading his early partnership letters was he wasn't just beating the New York Stock Exchange at the time, he was destroying it. And every, by 15-20% a year, and every letter started off the same. I did really well this year. I probably won't do as well next year. And then the next year he would kill it again. And
Yeah.
it was crazy, And so when I read all those things, I was just kind of amazed. I didn't notice it. I've read them a couple times, and the first time I read them, I didn't really pick up on that. The second time I did, and I know not too long ago he was asked at a recent shareholder meeting if he could beat the market today, and he said, "Yeah, if you give me $1 million, I could earn 50% a year on that today." And after if you hear that out of context, you're like, well, that's kind of arrogant. But then if you look at what he did when he was younger, yeah, you could believe it because he had the skills then to do that. And it was kind of an amazing time for him. He really, really, really did well during that period. But he decided to wind that up and do other things because he was starting to get burned out. And that's kind of when we can segue into what we know today. So you want to take us through that a little bit?
Yeah. So he, like you said, folded up the partnership, recommended that people go invest with another investor he was familiar with who had similar type of philosophy, the Ben Graham rooted kind of philosophy. And then after a short hiatus, almost like a Michael Jordan
Retirement.
era of yeah,
Right.
retirement and coming back, he ended up purchasing a big stake in Berkshire Hathaway. And Berkshire Hathaway at the time was a failing textile mill. It was definitely going in the direction you don't want to see, taking losses in a business that was being innovated away and being taken away from the United States and moving to other areas. And not really he laughs about it later that that was one of the worst mistakes he ever made.
Yeah.
Ironic because since he bought it up until now, I think the stock's up tens of thousands of percent since the 1965 or whenever he took control of Berkshire. But he went in there and bought enough stock to start to make a ruckus and then ended up becoming CEO. And there's a whole story in depth behind it. You can pick up, I recommend a book called Snowball
Mhm.
by Alice Schroeder. Is a great book
Mhm.
to walk you through all the drama that was involved with that. But he did have some lessons too about that experience with Berkshire. And I think some of those lessons kind of primed him for Charlie Munger. In that, the one that stuck out to me personally was that when you buy into this horrible situation, you have to turn it around. He had to make some pretty tough choices
Mhm.
that ended up in people losing their jobs and stuff and really needing to cut the fat to keep the company alive. And I remember him mentioning offhand somewhere he didn't want to have to do that again. To be this kind of corporate raider coming in, saving the day, it's not really his cup of tea. And it makes sense. It doesn't sound like a very pleasant job.
Mm-mm.
I'm reminded of that one movie. George Clooney is in it,
Mm.
and have you seen that?
I,
It's the
is the Money Monster one? No.
no, no. He's like a a guy who's always traveling, but he's like a
Oh,
consultant for
yes. Yeah.
helping these transition periods in
Right.
corporate.
Yeah.
It kind of
Right.
showed some of the ugly part of that,
Right.
people coming into a room and
Mhm.
being told, "You're gone."
Yeah. Yeah. Awful. Terrible.
Yeah, yeah.
Terrible. That time period was very, very volatile for him. And I think he learned a lot of lessons about how he didn't want to manage a business. And I think that helps set up more of the decentralized nature of what it is that they do. Like he wants to allocate capital, he wants to invest in stocks, and he wants to buy really good businesses that are run by really good people. So he doesn't have to do those things that you were talking about. He doesn't want to have to be the hatchet man or the person that has to make all these really hard decisions. Not that he's not capable of it, he just chooses not to do them. And I think that had a huge impact on the structure of Berkshire Hathaway. And then Charlie coming on board after that period, I think also had a huge, huge impact on him. And that was also around the time that he bought his first insurance business and incorporated that under the Berkshire Hathaway umbrella. And that was National Indemnity. And that was really the first kind of cash generating business that he bought, which really kind of set the stage for them to really start to become the Berkshire Hathaway we know today.
You wanna talk about the insurance part and why Buffett in particular found that such an attractive thing to purchase?
Mhm. Yeah, he loves insurance, and the main reason why he loves insurance is because insurance companies create this thing called an insurance float. A lot of businesses create a float, but in particular, insurance creates what's a float. And really, in its simple terms, what that is it's the timing difference between when we pay a premium for our car insurance and when we might have to get a claim because we got in an accident. So let's say that I pay Andrew for 10 years for car insurance and then I get in an accident on year 11, then he has to pay money out of that 10 years that I've been paying him. So he's had 10 years of premiums that he could do literally whatever he wants as long as he covers whatever I might need for our contract. And when Buffett figured that out, he became enamored with insurance businesses in particular. And he found one he really liked that was run by a really smart guy that had a lot of the characteristics that Buffett really liked. He was, stand-up person, was very ethical, and was trying to do the right thing by their customers as well as his employees. So he bought National Indemnity, and that became kind of the groundwork for starting to generate this float that then he could take and use to buy either other businesses, which he did, or to invest in securities, which he also did. So buying companies like American Express in his early days, the ability for him to be able to invest in that company in a large stake, which he took, a lot of that came from the insurance float that he was able to generate from that company and other smaller ones that he purchased along the way. And that was, I think, a little bit pre-Geico. He's had an on and off again relationship with Geico since his early days in the markets and before he owned it as a permanent. I think he's owned it, hasn't he owned it several times outright and then sold part of it and then bought it back kind of thing?
Yeah, he had shares. He
Mm.
had a pretty big stake of
Stake in it.
shares and
Okay.
then yeah.
Yeah. So
Yep.
insurance has really driven what we see today for Berkshire Hathaway. A lot of people talk a lot about the cash balance that they have on the balance sheet, 300, 400, 350 billion or some crazy number like that. A vast majority of that comes from the float that their insurance companies generate. So it's one of his favorite secret sauces.
It really is probably the perfect business for a superior capital allocator to
Hmm.
be in. A lot of businesses you could just kind of get out of the way
Right.
and it will do pretty well. Something like that where there's constant cash coming in
Hmm.
that needs to be put to work. It is the perfect place for a capital allocator to
Yeah.
be in.
It really is. And because it generates so much, and he's also very patient in how he uses his air quote elephant gun, but he definitely tries to find the things that are going to be the best. And he also part of this allocation, his mindset is also what's going to be best for the shareholders, not always necessarily for the business. And so when he allocates the money, he's thinking about all those things. He's not just thinking about his own pocketbook. He's thinking about you and I that invest with him. And that's very important to him. And that's another thing that kind of sets him apart from other managers and other investors from his era as well as today.
Yeah, he's not an empire builder in the sense that, it's growth at all costs or anything like that. He he has done a great job of buying back stock when Berkshire stock is cheap and holding off on expensive acquisitions or expensive stock purchases, which makes people ridicule him in the short term. Yet somehow in the long term, that seems to always come around. And it's coming around right now because
Mhm.
people were literally mocking him a few months ago for selling so much Apple.
Mhm.
And now it's like, oh, you genius, it's like, all right.
Yeah, it can be kind of comical to see some of the comments that people make. I'm not saying that he's above criticism or above questioning decisions, and he'll say that himself. He'll say that he's sucked his thumb on things or made mistakes, made errors of omission as well as commission. He never says he's perfect, and he tries to do the best that he can. But I would say that a vast majority of his decisions turn out really well, and his decision about Apple is turning out to be prescient at the moment, and all the money that he's sitting on, we don't know what he's going to do or how that's going to be managed once he's no longer with the company. But certainly puts Greg Abel, who's going to take over, in a really good position for himself. So if they want to start paying a dividend, for example, just speculating, of course, that they got the cash to do it now, and they don't have to worry about operations. They can just start whittling away that cash pile over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So what else has stood out to you as he has grown Berkshire into the beast that it is?
Several things that kind of stand out to me. Number one is, and he said this a few times in the shareholder meetings, that he's a better investor because he's a businessman, and he's a better businessman because he's an investor. And his approach to buying outright businesses as well as investments is he's looking at the business as a business, not a stock. And so I don't think he differentiates per se from buying Dairy Queen outright to investing in American Express. I think he looks at it as these are businesses that I want to own. If I can't own it outright, I'm content to own a part of it. And so I think that outlook and that approach to me makes a lot of sense, because it helps focus on what's really important about what you're buying, as opposed to trying to worry about what kind of return you're going to get or trying to project all those things. I think he focuses really on the fundamentals of the business and whether that is sustainable or not. And then the other thing that I have taken away from how he does this, that is that he has a foundation of things that he believes in, but he's also been adaptable to those ideas through the years. And he's taken good ideas from Charlie and helped them kind of mold who he became, as opposed to being just, okay, this is the way I invest and this is the way I'm going to stay, kind of thing. And I like the fact that he's been willing to, what's that phrase? Change his mind when the facts change. And I like that. I admire that about him. And I think that's something that I hope that I can do someday.
Yeah. But he also doesn't stray too far from what he knows works and
No,
what has worked for him.
no,
So
no.
he definitely balances it really well.
Right. Yeah. He's not going from trying to buy companies for less than a 15 PE kind of thing to suddenly speculating on Bitcoin, for example. So, he's not,
Mhm.
he's not straying too far out, but he is willing to look at things that maybe he normally wouldn't have looked at, or try to, I think his mindset changed, where instead of buying the cigar butts and the kind of the dumpster diving of his early days, he's become much more of a fan of buying a great business at a fair price, as opposed to a business at a really attractive price.
Mhm. Yes. My life's passion is to turn over as many rocks as I can to find the gold that's hidden underneath. To see a sample of a stock where I did just that, go to stockwriteup.com. What about the last, let's call it 20, 25 years, has impressed you most about Warren Buffett as an investor?
Oh boy. I think the main thing is his patience and his
Mhm.
willingness to not do things. That was most evident during the pandemic. He had a lot of cash on the balance sheet early on in the pandemic when the stock market was going crazy and everybody was running for the hills. He didn't really pull the trigger on much, if anything. I know he sold the airlines that he owned, but I don't recall him buying anything. And if he did, it wasn't anything outrageous. And I think that to me showed a lot of patience and restraint. And I like that he he seems to me like he's like the calm person sitting on the top of the ivory tower while the storm rages around him. And that appeals to me. And I think that's something that has really impressed me. He hasn't really changed, even though he's 95 and still going strong. That he still wants and loves to do this, and that's inspiring to me. What about you?
Yeah, for sure. That, and then just how willing he is to teach
Mm,
everybody, because everybody wants to know, how'd you do it? How'd you do it? And so they have these long annual meetings in Nebraska every year. And at his age, he's still up there for hours on stage. F- no, maybe not no, but very little reason for his own benefit to
mhm,
be putting that kind of time and effort into that whole thing. His way of giving back and really empowering the next generation of investors. And it's, to me, that is so inspiring
mhm,
because I can't imagine that that's an easy thing to do, hearing the same questions year after year after year.
mhm,
Probably, the same kind of concerns or judgments like, why aren't you buying this? Why haven't you seen the world's changing like this? Same message, different cast of characters, just that revolving door. And he powers through it. And I think that's really cool. And it shows he's passionate and he doesn't just do it for a paycheck, but he does it because, like you said, he loves what he does. And he likes to help people who are behind him to give him a hand up. So I find that really inspiring. And I know for me personally, I discovered Buffett very early in the whole learning about the stock market and Wall Street journey. And to see somebody like him who did not have that kind of stereotype that I always assumed was the case in the finance world was so inspiring to me that, okay, I can approach this.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he obviously had a great education, but he came from small Nebraska. He lives in Omaha, Nebraska, and he doesn't have an ostentatious house. He doesn't have, flashy cars or wear flashy suits or anything like that. And he just does what he does, and he's willing to share how he does it. He doesn't tell you what he buys, but he certainly will teach you how to fish. And I think the fact that he's been doing it for so long is very admirable.
One of the things I liked seeing, there's so many things about Buffett, and the internet's full of it. But one of my favorite little quirks about him was that not too long ago, this was probably before the pandemic, but there's a video of him on YouTube, and it was like Business Insider or somebody came along to see what's the morning routine of Warren Buffett, and his wife would leave him exact change for his drive-through, his morning breakfast drive-through for McDonald's. And depending on how much change his wife left him is what he would order for breakfast that morning, whether it was like a sausage McMuffin, or maybe she left a little bit less and he had to get, I don't know, a hash browns or whatever. And he would always pay exact change at the drive-through. And I found that so funny and endearing. Like,
Hmm.
all right, he's just an everyday guy. He's
Hmm.
practical. He's got billions of dollars, that he could tap at any time, and he's out there just using exact change for his breakfast at McDonald's. I just love that.
Yeah, that's a great anecdote, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like the perfect anecdote for who he is.
Yeah.
So I guess to wrap it up, what about Buffett have you learned from, and what do you kind of take forward from his lessons, I guess.
Yeah, there's so much. It's hard, right? I think through his actions, he's shown that buying stuff cheap, even the best businesses, there's so many super good businesses that he's passed up on, and he's lamented about a few like Google. But despite that, even he's just always kind of buying with the odds in his favor, and I find that really inspiring. He's also had Charlie Munger along with him to kind of keep his head on straight, and like he called him Charlie the abominable
Yeah.
no man, and that being such a integral part of his life and such a crucial part of his success just shows that even one of the smartest guys in the world needs somebody to bounce ideas off of. And so if Warren Buffett does, then if you're listening to this, so do you too, by the way. And then the wisdom and fortitude to hold stocks longer than maybe you might feel comfortable doing. And especially the dichotomy of that as he is such a value investor. We kind of look at Coca-Cola and like, oh, he should have sold in 1999 when the PE got up really high. And yeah, probably that's probably the case. But also, like, how many dividends has he gotten from Coca-Cola since? And how has his track record been besides that? And just the ideas and the businesses he has held for a long time that have worked out really well, like American Express, you mentioned.
Mm.
That kind of a long-term mindset coupled with finding some of the great businesses, coupled with finding them at great prices, all make this really, really nice recipe that would still be a nice recipe without one of the few components, but put all together really made this magical thing of wealth creation that a lot of us can only dream of.
Mhm.
So to me, the way he was able to incorporate all those pieces and turn that into his life and his career was very inspiring. So what about you?
I think probably a few things that really kind of stand out is he has remained his whole life a constant learning machine, and he's always curious and never thinks that he knows everything. And that really appeals to me. I'm curious like a cat, and so I like to learn all the time. And the fact that he is like that and still going strong at his age gives me hope that I will remain that way. And I like that about him. That really kind of inspires me. And then I also just like his philosophy of the things that he kind of espouses are all simple, common sense things, not easy to do, but they're simple and make a lot of sense, and they just resonate really well with me. Things like, find a business that you can understand, find a company at a price that you think is reasonable, find management that you trust and respect, and understand what the company could do in the future. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but those simple ideas are a great framework to try to find really good businesses to buy. And if you just kind of stick to that kind of framework, you can narrow down your choices and find some really good things to potentially invest in. And if you kind of combine that with having some patience, then I think the world could be your oyster. And I love that idea.
Yeah, those are great. That's a really practical takeaway that so
Mm,
many of us should pay attention to
yeah.
for sure.
All right. Well, with that, we will go ahead and wrap up our show for today. Thank you guys for listening. We hope you enjoyed our little discussion. If you guys have any questions or if there's anything you'd like us to talk about, please reach out to us at newsletter@einvestingforbeginners.com. You can also reach out to us on the Twitter machine or X machine, sorry. And then also you could reach out to us on Spotify. In the app, you can ask us questions as well. We'd love to answer them on the air for you and help you out as much as we can. So with that, we'll go ahead and invest with a margin of safety, emphasis on the safety. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you all next week.